a quiet archive record. Tonight, we're stepping into a slow unfolding. Settle in, let the outside world dissolve, and gently descend into tonight's world. In 1989, a man in Nevada went on television and claimed he had worked on recovered flying saucers. His name was Bob Lazar. He said the work happened at a site he called S4. He placed it near Area 51, south of Groom Lake, close to Papoose Lake. He said he was hired to help reverse engineer a craft that was not made by any known country. Since then, the Lazar case has split into two arguments. One argument says Lazar was a real insider who saw a hidden program. The other argument says he built a story from real secrecy, real locations, and UFO folklore. This record follows the public timeline, the main claims, the best-known supporting points, and the strongest objections. It separates what can be checked from what cannot. It notes where evidence exists, where it is missing, and where secrecy is used as an explanation. The goal is a clean case file that can be read without assuming belief or disbelief. Tonight, we go through the Bob Lazar Investigation. In May 1989, Las Vegas journalist George Knapp broadcast an interview with Lazar. At first, Lazar hid his identity and used the name Dennis. Soon after, Lazar appeared under his real name. Knapp presented Lazar as someone with first-hand knowledge of a secret program. The interviews created a public starting point. From there, everything else depends on later retellings, later witnesses, and later arguments. That is why the first claims matter. They show what was said early. They also show what was not shown. No documents, no samples, no hardware. Lazar's core claims, stated plainly, are these. He claimed the US government possessed multiple disc-shaped craft. He has often said there were 9. He claimed some were stored in hangars carved into a mountainside. He claimed the craft flew in a way that looked nothing like jets or helicopters. He claimed the propulsion system involved gravity. He claimed it used 3 gravity amplifiers. He claimed the craft could rotate, then move belly first. He claimed the program used a fuel source he called Element 115. He claimed it could produce energy. He claimed it could be used to create the gravity effect. He later implied the element was stable and usable, unlike the short-lived super-heavy elements produced in labs. He claimed he was hired to work on this. He claimed he had a strong scientific background. He claimed he studied at MIT. He claimed he studied at Caltech. Those last 2 claims are where the case first breaks. Because when people tried to verify them, they could not find the records expected for that kind of education. Supporters respond with a specific counterclaim. They say Lazar's records were erased. They say that is what a secret program would do. Critics respond with a simpler explanation. They say Lazar never attended. To judge between these, we need to build a timeline and collect anchors. Anchors are details that can be checked without trusting Lazar's memory. Anchor 1 is an early newspaper article. In 1982, the Albuquerque Journal ran a story about a jet-powered car. The builder was Bob Lazar. This does not prove alien technology, but it places Lazar in the public record as a technically ambitious tinkerer. Anchor 2 is Los Alamos. Lazar has said he worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory. His name has been reported as appearing in a Los Alamos phone directory. If true, that is not nothing. It suggests he had some relationship with the lab, but it does not settle his job title. A directory entry could indicate staff, or a contractor, or a support role. So the question becomes what Lazar actually did there and when. Anchor 3 is the Edward Teller connection. Lazar has suggested he met, or at least crossed paths with, physicist Edward Teller. There is a photograph from a public event where Teller appears, and Lazar is visible in the background. Again, this is not proof of recruitment, but it is a real trace. Anchor 4 is the hand scanner. Lazar described a biometric device used for access control. He said it measured bones in the hand. For years, skeptics mocked this detail. Later, images of real hand geometry scanners from past decades circulated, looking similar to what he described. Supporters treat this as a point in Lazar's favor. Critics treat it as a detail Lazar could have learned in other ways. Anchor 5 is the test flight story. Lazar said the craft were test flown at night. He said he knew schedules. He said he took friends to watch from a distance. Some friends have described seeing unusual lights. That is a claim with witnesses. But it is still difficult to interpret. Lights in the desert sky can be many things. Now, we move from anchors to the disputed center, S4. Lazar described S4 as separate from the main Area 51 complex. He described being bused to the site. He described being told not to look out the windows. He described hangar doors that blended into the mountain. He described walking into a hangar and seeing a disc. Not a crude model, not a balloon, but a smooth craft. He described it as if it were built with a different logic. He described a small team. He described working in pairs. He described being given a thin set of documents. He said the documents contained shocking claims about human history. He said some material discussed previous contact. He said he could not verify those claims. He was simply shown them. And here is one of the first patterns in the Lazar story. When he speaks about the craft itself, he often sounds specific. When he speaks about the big context, he often says, in effect, "I was told." So, to treat this fairly, we separate what he claims to have seen and touched from what he claims to have been told. He says he saw the craft. He says he worked near it. He says he saw tests. He says he was told about briefings. He says he was told about origins. He says he was told about risks. That separation matters. Because a person can be honest about what they saw and wrong about what they were told. Or a person can be dishonest about both. Or a person can be half honest, mixing truth and story until even they cannot fully separate them. So we build the case like an investigator, one shelf at a time. First shelf. Who is Bob Lazar before 1989? We know there is a public record of the jet car story. We also know Lazar had an interest in technology. He ran small ventures. He was involved in electronics. He was not a random person with no technical interest. But the jet car story can also be read in two ways. Supporters say it shows skill. Critics say it shows showmanship. Both can be true. A person can be skilled and also hungry for attention. Now, Los Alamos. Here, the record is murky. We hear claims that Lazar was in a phone book. We hear claims he worked there. We also hear claims he was not a physicist, but rather a technician for a contractor. This is one of the strongest parts of the debate, because if Lazar truly worked as a scientist at Los Alamos, that would support the idea he could be recruited. But if he worked in a lower role, that does not end the story, but it weakens the specific image he presented. The problem for an outside investigator is that much of this is not easily settled. People repeat second-hand statements. Documents are not always accessible. Names can appear in directories for many reasons. So the investigator does something simple. They list what is known. They list what is claimed. They list what is unknown. Known. Lazar was associated with Los Alamos in some way. Claimed. He was a physicist. Claimed. He was a contractor. Unknown. The exact role, the exact dates, and the exact access. Now, if the story ended there, it would be an interesting local mystery. But then comes the central claim. S4. Recovered craft. Element 1015. Gravity manipulation. It is the kind of claim that changes everything. And that means it needs a different level of evidence. In ordinary life, we accept many things on trust. A friend tells us a story. A co-worker describes a problem. We nod. We take it in. But for a claim this large, trust is not enough. So we ask, what evidence exists outside Lazar's words? Supporters point to the test flight witnesses. Supporters point to the hand scanner detail. Supporters point to the Los Alamos connection. Critics point to the missing school records. Critics point to inconsistencies. Critics point to Lazar's later legal troubles. Critics point to how the story fits into UFO culture. And hovering over all of it is a difficult idea. If a program is truly secret, then proof might be hidden. An absence of proof does not prove absence. But there is also a trap. A perfect secrecy argument can protect any story. If you can explain away every missing record by saying it was erased, then the story becomes unfalsifiable. An unfalsifiable story cannot be tested, and a story that cannot be tested cannot be confirmed. So a careful approach does not use secrecy as a universal answer. It uses it only where it fits. Now we move into the 1989 moment. Lazar says he went public because he feared for his life. He says he felt trapped. He says he wanted protection. The logic is that public attention would make it harder to silence him. This logic has been used by many whistleblowers. Sometimes it is true. Sometimes it is a narrative. George Knapp, as a journalist, took the story seriously. He presented Lazarus with a tone of concern. He framed him as a person under pressure, and that broadcast became the root of the myth. From there, the story grew. It moved through documentaries. It moved through radio shows. It moved through the early internet. It became a reference point. Now, we slow down again. Because to complete this case file, we need to explain the key technical claim in simple terms, not to prove it, but to understand what Lazar said. Lazar spoke about gravity. He spoke about amplifiers. He spoke about a reactor. He spoke about element 115. In ordinary physics, gravity is the weakest force. We do not have machines that can shape it. We can measure it. We can predict it. But we cannot easily generate it. So when Lazar claims a machine can focus gravity, he is not talking about a small improvement. He is talking about a new kind of technology. He described 3 devices. He called them gravity amplifiers. He described them as mounted below the craft. He claimed they could be aimed. He said the craft would tilt, then move in a direction that did not look like a plane. He also described a mode where the craft would rotate, then it would fly belly first. This is not impossible as a story. It is easy to imagine. But imagining is not proof. So we ask, what would it take to make it real? It would take a stable, powerful energy source. It would take control over fields. It would take new materials. It would take knowledge not shown in public science. That is why the element 115 claim matters, because Lazar offered it as the fuel. In the years after Lazar first spoke, scientists did create element 115. It was made in a lab. It existed briefly. It decayed. Supporters say he predicted it. Critics say he could have guessed that heavier elements might exist. In truth, the periodic table did not stop. Scientists were already reaching toward heavier elements. The idea of an island of stability was discussed, so the concept was not unknown. But Lazar's specific claim was not just that element 115 would exist. It was that it would be stable and usable and able to power a gravity engine. That part has not been shown. Now, in the Lazar story, the gravity engine is not just a cool detail. It is the core, because it is the part that cannot be faked with a simple aircraft. So if Lazar is telling the truth, then somewhere a device exists that can shape gravity. And if that is true, then the world is different. So we come back to a simple principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And in the Lazar case, the evidence is mostly stories. But there are still those anchors. So we examine them more closely. The hand scanner. Hand geometry scanners existed. They were used in security. So Lazar describing one does not require alien secrets. But it does suggest he had seen a secure facility, or had learned about one. The night watches. Friends said Lazar took them to a spot. They saw lights. The desert is full of test flights. The US has tested unusual craft. So seeing strange lights is not proof of aliens, but it can be proof of secrecy. The question is, what kind? Now, it is possible Lazar worked around a program. It is possible he saw something that was real, but not alien. Some have suggested a third track, a middle track. In this track, Lazar is not a pure liar and not a pure insider. He may have had limited access. He may have been used as a pawn. He may have been fed stories. He may have mixed real secrecy with myth. This is a familiar pattern in intelligence history. Disinformation can be used to hide real programs. A rumor can distract. A story can make the truth harder to see. So we ask, if Lazar was used, what would be the purpose? One purpose could be simple: to muddy the waters around Area 51, to make the public chase aliens while real aircraft testing continues. Another purpose could be accidental. A man hears rumors, he builds a story, he goes public, and the story becomes its own shield. Now critics will say, this is too generous. They will say there is no need for an elaborate explanation. They will say the simplest story is that Lazar lied, and in many cases, the simplest story is the best. But the Lazar case persists because there are enough odd details to keep the debate alive. Now, we move to the education claims. Lazar claimed MIT. He claimed Caltech. Investigators looked. They did not find records. They did not find classmates. They did not find the normal trail. Supporters say the records were erased. Critics say they never existed. This is one of the cleanest tests, because it is hard to erase all traces of a life. A person at a school leaves footprints, housing, friends, projects, photos, letters. Total erasure is rare. It can happen in a spy case, but it is rare. So, if you want to be strict, this point weighs against Lazar. Now consider another layer. Lazar's style. He speaks with confidence. He uses technical words. He tells a story in a steady way. Some people hear that and think it sounds true. Others hear that and think it sounds rehearsed. But confidence can be genuine, and confidence can be performance. So we do not use tone as a deciding factor. We return to facts. One fact: the US government has tested secret aircraft. Another fact: Area 51 was long denied. Another fact: people have seen strange things in Nevada skies. None of these facts prove alien craft. but they show why the story took root. There was already a blank space, and humans fill blank spaces. Now, we bring in the concept of mythology. Not mythology as in false. Mythology as in a story that carries meaning. The Lazar story carries a specific meaning. It says the world is bigger than we are told. It says there are rooms behind the walls. It says the powerful hide wonders. This meaning can be true even if the literal claim is not. And this is why a calm investigator keeps two questions separate. Question 1. Did Lazar work on alien craft? Question 2. Why do people need this story? Tonight, we focus mainly on question 1, but we will not ignore question 2. Now, we consider the timing. In the late 1980s, UFO culture was strong. Books circulated, rumors spread. The Cold War created a sense of shadow. A story about hidden craft fit the mood, and the location helped. Area 51 was real. The desert was real. Security was real. So the Lazar story did not need to invent a stage. The stage already existed. Now, we examine the claim about S4's location. Lazar placed it near Papoose Lake. People searched. They looked for roads. They looked for signs. They looked for any hint. Some said they found nothing. Some said they found odd markings. But a hidden facility could be concealed, and a person could also be wrong. So the location detail remains uncertain. Now, we consider another claim, the Dennis identity. Lazar first appeared as an anonymous source. Then he appeared openly. If he were truly in danger, that move makes sense. Anonymity first, then a reveal. If he were constructing a story, that move also makes sense. It builds drama. It builds suspense. So again, the same fact can fit both tracks. Now we step back, because this case file needs a conclusion. Not a final verdict, but a careful judgment. To reach it, we will build a clean list. Points that support Lazar. 1. He was linked to Los Alamos in some way. 2. He described a hand scanner that resembles real devices. 3. He took friends to see lights, and they report seeing something. 4. He has told the story for decades, with many consistent parts. Now points that weaken Lazar. 1. Education claims have not been confirmed in the normal way. 2. Some details shift over time. 3. Many claims rely only on his testimony. 4. The core technical claim has not been supported by physical evidence. Now a key point, consistency is not proof. A person can repeat a story for decades. Humans can become loyal to a narrative. They can fuse identity with story. So the weight rests on evidence. And in this case, public evidence is limited. So the best honest conclusion is cautious. It is possible Lazar was around a secret program. It is possible he saw unusual aircraft. It is possible he learned about classified systems. But the leap to alien craft is not supported by strong, independent proof. So in the case file, we do not stamp it confirmed, we stamp it unresolved. But we also note something. Unresolved does not mean pointless. Because the Lazar case helped force attention onto hidden testing. It helped keep the pressure on secrecy. It helped create a public conversation about what governments hide. And in that sense, Lazar mattered, even if the craft were not alien. Now, we move into a different kind of calm, because the remaining time in this story is about letting the mind drift. We have built the file. We have stacked the shelves. We have labeled the boxes. So now we can walk through the archive. And as we walk, we can let the details soften. Imagine the desert at night. The air is cold. The sky is wide. Far away, a light moves. It could be a plane. It could be a test craft. It could be a star that seems to drift. In the desert, distance lies. The mind fills gaps, and you can feel how stories are born, not just from lies, but from the mind trying to make sense of what it cannot easily hold. In that calm, the Lazar story becomes less like a fight and more like a question. What would it mean if we are not alone? What would it mean if we are? And what would it mean if the truth is somewhere between? A secret program, a misunderstood technology, a rumor shaped into a legend. The archive holds many such things. A folder labeled fact, a folder labeled claim, a folder labeled possible, a folder labeled unknown. And the investigator, late at night, turns the pages and knows they will never see the whole picture. Because some truths are hidden, and some truths are lost, and some truths were never true at all. But still, there is comfort in the work, to name the claims, to separate them, to lay them out, to refuse panic, to refuse blind belief, to refuse blind denial. Just calm, just careful. Now, let the mind float. The desert wind moves over a dry lake bed. It makes a low sound, not a voice, not a message, just air. A road runs straight for miles. The asphalt holds the day heat. It releases it slowly. A fence line stands in the distance. Signs warn of force, but the signs do not say what is behind. That is the point. And that is why stories rush in. A person sees the warning. They imagine hangars. They imagine mountains that open. They imagine silver discs. And the imagination is powerful. It can be used to escape. It can be used to hope. It can be used to fear. In the Lazar story, the imagination becomes a map of secrecy, a map of desire. And now, as you rest, you do not need to solve it. You can let the file close. You can let the papers settle. The only thing left is the soft rhythm of questions, like footsteps in a quiet hallway. What is true? What is claimed? What is unknown? And then, a longer pause, because sleep does not require answers. Sleep requires only safety and a steady tone and time. So we let the case file remain open, but not in a way that pulls you. It is open like a book on a table. You can close it tomorrow. Tonight, you simply drift. But before you drift too far, we can add a few more pages to the file. Not to stir you, not to wake you, just to complete the record. Because the Lazar story is not just one interview. It is a long chain, and each link has its own shape. So we turn another page. After the first broadcasts, Lazar became a figure people sought out. Some wanted to help him. Some wanted to expose him. Some simply wanted to be near the heat of the story. In stories like this, attention is a force. It pulls strangers into the orbit. It creates allies. It creates enemies. It creates people who act for truth, and people who act for ego, and people who cannot tell the difference. In the years after 1989, several repeating claims became part of the Lazar package. One is the idea that Lazar's past was wiped. The claim is that someone erased his school records, his job records, anything that would show his qualifications. A careful investigator asks two quiet questions. First, is erasure possible? Second, is erasure the best explanation for what we see? Erasure is possible in a narrow sense. Files can be altered. Records can be hidden. People can be pressured. But real erasure is hard. It is hard because the world is messy. Copies exist. People remember. Paper trails spread into many hands. So if the claim is that every trace was removed, that is a large claim too. It requires not just secrecy, but near-perfect control. And the more perfect the claim, the less likely it is. So the investigator writes this in the margin. Erasure may explain some gaps. It cannot easily explain all gaps. If the gaps are total, consider simpler explanations first. Now, we add another page, the Los Alamos phone directory. This is one of those details that gets repeated until it feels like a solid brick. A name in a directory can mean several things. It can mean staff. It can mean contractor. It can mean a person assigned to an office. It can mean a person who needs a phone. So the directory is a clue, not a verdict. But it is a clue that matters, because it places Lazar in a real setting that is connected to real science, and that is why supporters lean on it. They do not need it to prove aliens. They need it to prove he was not a pure outsider. Then critics respond with another quiet note. Being in a place is not the same as doing the job you claim. Both notes can be true at the same time. Now we add another page, the Edward Teller photograph. Supporters say, "Look, he is near Teller. Maybe Teller noticed him. Maybe Teller helped him." Critics say, "A photograph at a public event is not a private meeting. It is not recruitment. It is not proof of a relationship." The investigator writes, "A trace is not a chain. A picture is not a contract. Still, the trace is real." Now we add another page, the S4 briefing documents. Lazar claimed he was shown papers that included statements about past human history. He implied a larger narrative about how the world is managed. A careful investigator reacts in a calm way. If those papers exist, they would be explosive. But Lazar did not produce them. He described them. So we cannot treat them as evidence. We can treat them as part of his story. And we can ask, why would a secret program show a new employee sensational claims they cannot verify? There are two possibilities. One, the claims are true and the program is careless. Two, the claims are not true and the papers are part of control, part of intimidation, part of disinformation. In intelligence history, disinformation is a tool. Sometimes it is aimed outward, to confuse the public. Sometimes it is aimed inward, to test loyalty, to identify leaks, to create false trails. So if Lazar saw wild papers, that does not automatically support him. It could also suggest a setup. Now we add another page. Lazar also described the bus rides, the windows, the warnings. This is a detail that sounds like a movie. But movie details are often built from real practices. Blackout buses exist. Secure transport exists. It is not fantasy. So again, this detail is not proof of aliens. It is proof of a person knowing what secure handling can look like. Now, another page. The security culture around Area 51. In the late 20th century, Area 51 was not officially acknowledged for a long time. That denial created a strange effect. If a place is denied, then any story about it floats. The denial becomes a vacuum, and rumors rush in like air. The investigator writes, "Denial increases myth. Myth makes denial harder. A loop begins." Now we add another page, the test flights. The desert at night is a perfect stage. It is wide. It is empty. It is far from city lights. And the US has tested unusual craft, stealth aircraft, high-altitude aircraft, drone systems. Many of those craft, when seen at night, look strange. They can be silent from a distance. They can move in odd ways. They can appear to hover when they are actually moving toward or away. So when witnesses report lights, we do not mock them. We simply note that lights are not a full description. A light has no wings. A light has no body. A light does not show its engine. A light is a hint. Now, another page. The role of George Knapp. Knapp is often portrayed as either a brave journalist or a gullible promoter. The truth can be quieter. A journalist can follow a lead because the lead is interesting, because the lead matters, because the lead touches secrecy. A journalist can also be pulled by a story that is simply too good. And in the Lazar case, the story is perfectly shaped. A secret base, a hidden hangar, a craft, a dangerous whistleblower, a fear of death. It reads like a script. Sometimes reality does. Sometimes it does not. Now, another page. We consider the motive question. Critics often ask, why would Lazar lie? Supporters often ask, why would he risk it? But motive is not always clean. Humans are mixed. A person can want attention and also feel wronged. A person can exaggerate and also believe some parts. A person can be trapped and also opportunistic. So motive is not a lock. It is a clue. Now, another page. The legal troubles. Over the years, Lazar has faced legal issues. Critics point to them as a sign of unreliable character. Supporters respond that character attacks are common when people challenge power. The investigator writes, a troubled life does not prove a lie. A clean life does not prove truth. Still, patterns matter. Keep note, do not overuse. Now, another page. The consistency question. Lazar has told his story for a long time. Certain core pieces remain the same. Supporters say, a liar would slip. Critics say, a practiced story becomes stable. Both can be true. Humans can rehearse. Humans can also remember. So the investigator asks, are there hard contradictions? Are there impossible overlaps? Are there details that should be verifiable but are consistently not? In public, the strongest verifiable issues remain the education claims. If Lazar attended MIT and Caltech, there should be people. There should be traces. The absence of those traces is not a final verdict, but it is heavy. Now, another page. Element 115. This claim became a landmark because later scientists did synthesize an element with atomic number 115. But the lab-created element is not stable. It is not a fuel. It is not a battery. So supporters and critics talk past each other. Supporters focus on the number. Critics focus on the stability. The investigator writes, the number alone is not enough. The stability claim is the key. No public evidence supports stability. Now, another page. The reactor. Lazar described a small reactor, a device that could sit on a table, a device that produced huge energy. In our world, energy density like that is not easy to get without large heat and radiation problems. So again, the claim is massive. Without a physical sample, without a photo, without a measurable artifact, we cannot weigh it. Now, another page. The craft itself. Lazar described a smooth disk. He described it as having a simple shape. It is worth noting that a disk is a common UFO form long before Lazar, so the shape is not uniquely his. But the way he describes the interior, the way he describes the seats, the way he describes the smallness, these details are vivid. Vividness does not prove truth, but it is part of why the story sticks. Now, another page. We introduce one more idea. Sometimes a person can become the front of a story that is not entirely theirs. A culture can choose a person. A person can become a symbol. A person can be lifted and carried by a wave. Once that happens, the story is not just about facts. It is about belonging. To accept Lazar can mean accepting that hidden wonders exist. To reject Lazar can mean defending the idea that reality is knowable. So debates become emotional, not because the facts demand it, but because the identity does. The investigator writes, beware identity. When facts become flags, people stop looking. Now, another page. We look at the people around the story. In cases like this, it is not only the witness who matters, it is the network, who introduces whom, who amplifies, who edits, who sells, who doubts. Some names appear again and again: journalists, local friends, UFO researchers, skeptics. Each person brings a lens, and a lens changes what you see. A UFO researcher may see confirmation. A skeptic may see performance. A journalist may see a lead. A friend may see a man under stress. So we do not treat any one lens as the whole world. We treat lenses as filters. Now, another page. The idea of a whistleblower. When a person claims to reveal a secret, they often become trapped by the role. If they step back, they look like they are retracting. If they add details, they risk contradiction. If they refuse details, they look evasive. So the role itself creates a kind of pressure. The Lazar story over decades shows this pressure. When a question arises, an answer is demanded. And if the answer is not available, a story can grow around the gap. That is how myths expand. Not always from intention, sometimes from necessity. Now, another page. We examine the belly first detail. Supporters often highlight it. They say it is too strange to invent. But strange details are easy to invent. In fact, they can be a signature of invention, because the mind tries to add a hook, a unique feature, a memorable image. Still, this detail does something important. It makes the craft feel physical. It makes it feel designed. And that is why it sticks. Now, another page. We consider the desert viewing spot. People sometimes refer to a place where watchers gathered, a roadside pull-off, a hill. Over time, that spot became part of the legend. And legends often gain geography, because geography makes them real. You can stand where the story happened. You can look at the same sky. The investigator writes, "A place can be real while the explanation is wrong." Now, another page. We consider the simplest alternate explanation. If Lazar did not work on alien craft, what did he see? One possibility: nothing, only a story. Another possibility: a real secure facility, a real secret aircraft, a real culture of fear. If a person sees secret aircraft tests, they might misinterpret them. They might also be tempted to build a larger story, because secret aircraft are real, but alien craft are more powerful as a story. Now, another page. We consider why the government would not respond. If the claims were false, why not simply crush them? The answer can be simple. Sometimes the best response is no response. Responding gives attention. Responding admits there is something to respond to. And if a person is mixing real locations with false claims, responding might force you to reveal real truths. So silence can be a strategy. The investigator writes, "Silence is not confirmation. Silence is also not denial. Silence is just silence." Now, another page. We consider the human need for hidden rooms. Many people feel that modern life is flat, too explained, too mapped. A hidden program adds depth. It adds mystery. It adds a sense that the world still has secrets. This need is not childish. It is human. In earlier ages, mystery lived in forests, in oceans, in the far horizon. Now mystery is often imagined behind fences. So Area 51 becomes a modern mountain, a modern castle, a modern forbidden cave. And Lazar becomes a modern storyteller. Even if he is wrong, the role fits. Now, another page. We look at the problem of evidence. If a person claims there are 9 craft, we want a photo, a document, a part, a sample. But in this case, there is no public artifact that stands up to scrutiny. There are stories. There are witnesses. There are rumors of tapes. There are claims of raids, but nothing solid. So, the investigator uses a calm rule. If a claim requires a hidden object and the object never appears, keep the claim in unknown. Do not promote it to fact. Now, another page. We consider the later documentaries. Over time, media products formed around Lazar. Each product has its own goals. Some want truth, some want entertainment, some want both. Editing matters, music matters, shots of fences matter. They create a mood. A mood can feel like evidence, but a mood is not evidence. So the investigator writes, do not confuse atmosphere with proof. Now, another page. We consider memory. Human memory is not a recorder, it is a storyteller. When a person repeats a story, they strengthen the pathway. They make the story easier to access, and often they make the story feel more real, even if parts are wrong. So a person can be sincere and still mistaken. In the Lazar case, this matters, because sincerity is often used as proof, but sincerity can be manufactured, and sincerity can also grow naturally in a person who believes their own story. So, we keep the focus on external anchors. Now, another page. We consider a practical test. If Lazar truly worked on revolutionary propulsion, he would have gained a certain kind of understanding. Not just words, not just a story, but a deep technical grasp. Over decades, people have listened for that deep grasp. Some hear it, some do not. A careful investigator again avoids tone, but they can note this. Technical understanding shows itself in how a person handles questions, in how they define terms, in how they admit what they do not know. In many interviews, Lazar provides some technical flavor, then returns quickly to narrative. This pattern can mean many things. It can mean he truly had limited access. It can mean he is protecting details. It can mean he is working from a script, so it remains ambiguous. Now, another page. We consider risk. If Lazar were lying, he risked ridicule. He risked legal trouble. He risked attention. If Lazar were telling truth, he risked more. He risked the anger of a security state, so risk alone cannot tell us which track is correct. Some people take enormous risks for fame. Some people take enormous risks for principle. Humans are capable of both. Now, another page. We consider how stories survive. A story survives when it is simple enough to repeat, strange enough to remember, and connected enough to reality to feel plausible. The Lazar story has all three. Simple. A man worked on a saucer. Strange. Element 115. Hand scanners. Hangars in a mountain. Connected. Area 51. Los Alamos. Real secrecy. That is why it lasts. Now, another page. We look at how skepticism can fail. Sometimes skeptics become careless. They mock. They sneer. Mockery is not investigation. It can even strengthen a myth. Because when people feel mocked, they cling harder. So a good skeptic is calm. They simply say, show me the record. Show me the trace. Show me the artifact. If it does not appear, they keep the claim on the shelf. Now, another page. We look at how belief can fail. Sometimes believers become careless. They connect dots too fast. They treat every gap as proof of erasure. They treat every coincidence as a signal. That is not investigation. That is pattern hunger. So a good believer, if such a phrase fits, would also be calm. They would say, I want this to be true, but I will not force it. Now, another page. We step into a quiet conclusion. The Lazar case is a mirror. If you distrust power, you may see him as a victim. If you trust institutions, you may see him as a storyteller. If you live in the grey, you may see him as both. The archive accepts all three as human reactions, but the archive also asks for a stamp, and the stamp, based on public evidence, remains the same. Unresolved, not proven, not fully disproven. A case with strong cultural weight and weak physical evidence. Now, with these pages added, we return to our earlier shelf labels. Fact, claim, possible, unknown, and we place a few items carefully. Fact, Lazar went on TV. Fact, he said he worked on craft. Fact, Area 51 exists as a secret test site. Fact, the government has tested unusual aircraft. Claim, S4 exists as described. Claim, recovered craft was stored there. Claim, element 115 was stable. Claim, a gravity engine was built. Possible. Lazar had limited access to classified environments. Possible. He was used as a pawn or distraction. Possible. He built his story from real rumors and real places. Unknown. What Lazar truly did at Los Alamos. Unknown. What he truly saw in the desert. Unknown. Whether any recovered craft exists at all. The file remains open, but it is better organized now. An organization is a kind of piece. One more set of pages belongs in the file. The pages that cover what happened after the first broadcasts. After the May 1989 reports, Lazar became known beyond Las Vegas. His claims were repeated in UFO circles, on radio, and in print. The story became a reference point for Area 51 conversations. A key detail in the early period is that Lazar did not appear alone. Other people spoke around the edges of the story. Some were friends, some were promoters, some were researchers, some were skeptics. In the early accounts, Lazar described a schedule for test flights. He described a viewpoint at a distance. He said he went there with friends. Those friends later described lights moving in the night sky. That gives the file a set of shared events. It does not identify the source of the lights. It does not prove alien craft. It does show that the story was tied to real nights in the desert. Another early detail is Lazar's description of security and access. He described badge checks. He described briefings. He described compartmentalization. He described being told that questions were dangerous. Those details fit how many secure programs operate. They also fit how secure programs are portrayed. So they remain plausible, but not decisive. As the story spread, a few claims became central talking points. One talking point is the idea of record erasure. Supporters often argue that a secret program would remove traces. Critics argue that complete erasure is unlikely. The file can note a basic fact. Academic records usually leave many traces. A person who attended major institutions typically leaves a web of contacts, housing, projects, friends, photos, letters, a pattern of life. In the public record, that web has not appeared in a strong form for Lazar. That does not fully disprove the claim. It does weigh against it. Another talking point is the Los Alamos connection. The file can treat it as a narrow anchor. There are reports that Lazar's name appeared in a Los Alamos phone directory. That suggests a relationship with the site. The relationship could be staff or contractor. It could involve a technical role. It could involve support work. Without a verified employment record, the exact role remains unclear. But the connection itself is not nothing. It places Lazar near a real facility tied to high-end research. A third talking point is the hand geometry scanner. This point is often presented as a prediction. Lazar described a device that measured the hand. Later, images of similar devices circulated. This makes the detail plausible. It also means the detail could have been learned from ordinary sources. Security technology existed. It was not alien. So the scanner is an interesting point, but not a strong proof. A fourth talking point is element 115. In public science, researchers later created an element with atomic number 115. The created material was not stable. It decayed quickly. It was not a usable fuel. Lazar's claim was not only about the existence of an element, it was about a stable form and a specific use. That has not been demonstrated in public. A fifth talking point is the craft flight profile. Lazar described a rotation and a belly-first movement. This detail is vivid. It is also hard to test. No public video exists that clearly matches the description. Witness reports of lights do not provide a craft outline, so the flight profile remains a claimed observation. Now, the file can include a realistic alternative explanation. Area 51 was a secret test range. The United States tested advanced aircraft programs. Some were strange in shape and behavior. Stealth programs existed. Drone programs existed. High-altitude platforms existed. Viewed at night from far away, aircraft can appear unusual. Perspective can make motion look odd. Distance can hide engine noise. A moving aircraft can look like a hovering light if it is coming toward the viewer. So a witness can be honest and still be wrong about what they saw. The file can also include a second alternative explanation. Disinformation has been used around classified programs. A wild story can be a shield. It can draw attention away from ordinary secrecy. It can make a real program harder to talk about. If anyone tries to discuss the real program, they can be mocked as an alien believer. This pattern has existed in other settings. It is possible here. It is not proven here. Another part of the Lazar file is how the story changed the culture. After Lazar, the phrase Area 51 became a global symbol. Before that, it existed as a rumor and an insider term. After that, it became common knowledge. The site became part of movies and television. It became shorthand for hidden government science. In that way, the Lazar story had an impact even without physical proof. It focused attention on a real secret test location. It pushed the public to ask what was being tested. It also blended questions about human technology with claims about non-human technology. That blending is part of why the debate remains intense. A careful reader can separate the layers. One layer is secrecy itself. That layer is real. Another layer is advanced human technology. That layer is real in general, even if specific programs are classified. Another layer is the claim of recovered craft. That layer is not supported by strong public evidence in this case. Now, the file can include a final note about why the case persists. The Lazar story is simple. A witness, a place, a dangerous secret, a missing paper trail, a fuel with a number, a craft that moves in a strange way. The story is easy to repeat, it is easy to picture, and it sits on a real stage of secrecy, so it lasts. The file also benefits from a clear timeline. A timeline does not prove the claims. It helps keep the story ordered. 1982. A newspaper story in Albuquerque described a jet-powered car built by Lazar. This places him in the public record as a technical hobbyist and promoter. Mid to late 1980s. Lazar described work connected to Los Alamos. Public discussion later focused on whether he was staff or contractor. The exact role remains disputed in public. Spring 1989. Lazar spoke with George Knapp. He first appeared under an alias. Soon after, he appeared by name. He claimed work on a craft at a site he called S4. He described buses, briefings, and strict security. Late 1989. The story spread beyond Las Vegas. The desert viewing trips became part of the narrative. People described lights and unusual motion. No clear physical artifact was produced. 1990s. The story continued in books, radio, and early online forums. The education claims became a major line of attack. Supporters argued erasure. Critics argued the absence was simpler. 2000s and later, documentaries revisited the case. Interviews repeated the core claims. Public science synthesized element 115 in a lab. The lab result did not match the stable fuel claim. The debate continued. In any long-running controversy, another effect appears. Each new retelling changes the audience. A person who hears the story secondhand often hears a simplified version. The simplified version can sound stronger than the real record. Details become sharper. Uncertain points become certain. This is a normal human process. So the file should hold the earliest sources as the anchor. The earliest sources are still interviews and recollections. That is the key limit. If the case is judged strictly on public evidence, the case remains weak on artifacts. It remains strong on narrative. That difference matters. A strong narrative can be compelling. A strong narrative can also be wrong. So the best reading is disciplined. Separate secrecy from aliens. Separate witnesses from interpretations. Separate what can be checked from what is only repeated. Another point in the file is the government response pattern. In many controversies, people expect a direct statement. They expect an admission or a denial. But classified programs often avoid direct statements. Silence can be routine. Silence can be policy. Silence can also be useful. A direct denial can draw attention. A direct denial can lock officials into language that later becomes a problem. A direct denial can also require explaining what is being protected. So non-response is common. That is why silence is not confirmation. It is also why silence cannot be used as proof of a cover-up. Some people look to documents. They look to filings and audits. They look to flight logs. They look to employment records. Those sources can be strong when they exist. In the Lazar case, the public record has not produced a decisive paper trail. That keeps the case in the space between. A space where stories can grow. In that space, small details take on extra weight. A directory entry becomes a badge. A photograph becomes a relationship. A vague light becomes a craft. This does not mean the details are fake. It means the audience is hungry for anchors. When anchors are scarce, the mind uses what it can find. It fills gaps. It chooses a side. It repeats what sounds solid. That is why a written case file matters. It keeps the gap visible, and it reduces drift over time. The last step in the file is an assessment. There are claims that can be checked. There are claims that can only be repeated. The file treats the two categories differently. Checked claims can be used as anchors. Repeated claims stay in the claim section. They can be described and compared. They cannot be upgraded to fact without outside support. The checked claims are limited. Lazar was a real person in the public record. He had technical interests. He was connected to Los Alamos in some capacity. He appeared on television in 1989 and made specific statements. He described a facility he called S4. He described a craft and a propulsion concept. Some supporting points are real but narrow. Hand geometry scanners existed and were used in security. So that detail is plausible. People did go into the desert with Lazar and reported lights in the sky. So there were shared events. Area 51 was a real secret test location. So secrecy was a real backdrop. The strongest objections are also clear. The education claims have not been confirmed through normal records. No stable sample of element 115 has been shown. No reactor has been shown. No part of a craft has been shown. No document set has been released that can be authenticated. Because of that, the central claim cannot be confirmed from public evidence. Public evidence supports secrecy in Nevada. Public evidence does not support recovered alien craft. A cautious reader can hold two ideas at once. First, classified testing at Area 51 was real and continues to be real. Second, the specific Lazar story about alien craft at S4 remains unproven. There is also a third possibility that cannot be ruled out from public data. Lazar may have had limited contact with classified environments and built a larger story around that contact. That can explain why some details feel grounded and others do not. It can also explain why the story fits so well into the shape of existing UFO folklore. Over time, the Lazar story became a template. It taught later UFO media a structure, a secret base, a fearful witness, a claim of erased records, a small set of supporting details, a lack of physical proof, a lasting argument. So the case file ends with a simple label: unresolved. Unresolved can mean two different things. It can mean a claim that is true but hidden. It can also mean a claim that is false but hard to fully disprove. Both produce the same public shape: few artifacts, many arguments, many retellings. In this file, unresolved is used in the second sense. The claim is not confirmed by strong public evidence. The public record does not close every door. It simply does not open the central one. Not confirmed, not settled. A story that persists because it sits on real secrecy and offers an extraordinary explanation. And the final notes are practical. If new evidence appears, it would have to be evidence that can be checked. A document with verifiable provenance. A physical sample that can be tested. A record that can be confirmed by independent sources. Without that, the story remains a record of claims. Strong evidence would have a few traits. It would be specific. It would be testable. It would be independent. Specific means it points to a date, a place, a person, or an object that can be verified. Testable means it can be examined by more than one qualified group with the same result. Independent means it does not come from the same small circle of people repeating the same story. For example, an employment record that can be verified through multiple sources would matter. A laboratory sample with clear chain of custody would matter. A document set with verifiable origin and internal consistency would matter. Without those traits, a claim stays in the file as a claim. The file can also record what would not be enough. A rumor is not enough. A retelling is not enough. A video of distant lights is not enough. A witness who heard it from a witness is not enough. The reason is simple. The central claim is not small. A recovered craft program would be one of the biggest discoveries in human history. So the evidence would need to be strong. It would need to survive skeptical testing. It would need to stand without the story. In a disciplined case file, the burden stays on the claim. The absence of proof does not prove that something is impossible. It does mean that belief is optional. A person can stay open to the idea of non-human technology. A person can also refuse to treat any single case as settled without artifacts. That is where this record ends. One final note belongs in the margin. Area 51 style secrecy has produced real misunderstandings before. When the public lacks information, any strange sight becomes a canvas. A classified aircraft can look impossible from far away. A flare can look like a hovering object. A plane coming toward a viewer can look stationary. A plane turning can look like it changed direction without a curve. Those are normal limits of night observation. That does not mean every report is explained. It does mean that lights alone do not carry the weight of a recovered craft claim. Another margin note explains why the case creates so much disagreement. Some people treat the lack of evidence as the main fact. Others treat the secrecy as the main fact. Those are different starting points. If you start from lack of evidence, the case stays unproven. If you start from secrecy, the lack of evidence can be explained away. A disciplined file does not pick a starting point based on emotion. It starts from what can be checked. It keeps the rest in a separate section. So the case is filed. The labels are clear. The missing pieces are named. The debate is left on the shelf. This was a quiet archive story, where the story ends, sleep begins,